All right. So we wanted to recommend it for you all, as we do here on The Drop every week. So we are still living in the Drop universe.
Still is the Drop. It's just a costume.
Just a costume this week. We wanted to recommend a couple Osiris media podcasts that we have both been digging and that we think that you too will dig. First up, I want to recommend the Recovering Catholic with Katie Pruitt, and the episode in particular with Julian Baker. When the Recovering Catholic came to Osiris, I was insanely excited. Katie Pruitt put out a record in 2020 called Expectations. It was one of my favorite albums of the year. Her songwriting, the kind of sonic quality of it, the Americana, but like country tinged angle to the record just blew me away. And the more I read about her, the more I was fascinated about her backstory, her as a songwriter, and her as a musician. And I was really excited to hear more about her story via this podcast. I thought it was a really fascinating angle for us to take and for her to take as someone who was raised Catholic but has moved away from the church in a multitude of ways. And I honestly couldn't even tell you the last time I've been to church, but I still think about the idea of where does faith, where does spirituality fit in with my overall life? Where does my Catholic upbringing, my Christian upbringing fit in with my overall life? This was kind of a really interesting avenue to dive into from a thought standpoint. And then in her second episode, to have Julian Baker on, one of the best songwriters that we have in today's world, it was awesome. And this is an incredible conversation. Julian Baker talks about, her evolving relationship with God and her evolving relationship with the church, and how when she came out, how hard it was for her to find a church that was both accepting of her and also in line with where her beliefs were, and how she realized like a lot of progressive churches weren't in line with exactly where she was at, and she ended up finding a church in recent years that like has been exactly what she needed in terms of where she's at right now as a person and as a follower of Christ. So I love this conversation. It opened my eyes up in a lot of ways, and I cannot wait to see where this show unfolds. Katie Pruitt is a great host. She's a great interviewer, and I highly, highly recommend. If you're just interested in great conversations around music, if you have thoughts about wherever faith, wherever Christianity fits in your life, if you just like Julian Baker, whatever it may be, this conversation will provide a lot for you. So definitely recommend the Recovering Catholic episode 2 with Julian Baker. Dave, what do you got?
I have to go and listen to that. Like you, I totally love Katie Pruitt's Expectations. That was a phenomenal record. So I need to go back and listen to her podcast. That sounds great. So I'm going to talk about a podcast that I've certainly mentioned before, but I just think it's that good. That is the Freak Flag Flying podcast, of course, being the ongoing discussion between Steve Silberman and his very good friend David Crosby. So the podcast just wrapped up. It went over 2 seasons. I think each season had 4 episodes, and kind of it was like divided. I guess most recently, the final 2 episodes, episodes 7 and 8, kind of went into much detail about the recording of David Crosby's seminal solo album, If I Could Only Remember My Name, from 1971. They talk about its 50th anniversary. I know it was just reissued in vinyl on Rhino Records. I got to check that out. This is just a lovely conversation between 2 really close friends. And I mean, Crosby, it's just elegant listening to and speak, listening to his views, looking back in his life, looking back on the 60s and 70s. I know that the first part of the podcast, the first half of season 2, delved into a relationship that he had with his son, who discovered James Raymond and their songwriting, and a new David Crosby album that came out earlier in the year. But the last 2 episodes, the focus has been on If I Could Only Remember My Name. In particular, all of the musicians that went into the making of that record, which they called the Planet Earth Rock and Roll Orchestra, or PARO for short. The album had Jerry Garcia, had Graham Nash, it had Joni Mitchell, Paul Kantner, and Grace Slick from Jefferson Airplane. Just an amazing record, and really getting to go behind the curtain and hear like David Crosby and Steve Sullivan talk about it was an amazing treat. And after I'm done listening to this podcast, I always feel slightly better about the state of the world. And it's also very well produced, very easy to listen to, and incorporates a lot of music. So I would recommend that podcast very highly. It's Freak Flag Flying.